What's up, guys? Doug Polk here with a card player exclusive video, and today we're going to be talking about the difference in defending your big blind in a cash game to win a tournament. Now there's a lot of misguidance out there for both of the games, frankly, and it's important that we take a look at the games separately. I mean, they might seem like the same. Sure, it's ring no limit, 6, 8, 9 people get dealt in, there's a big blind, but they're actually quite different. Let's start off with the ante. Now in tournaments, unless it's the first couple of levels, you're going to be looking at an ante situation. That drastically changes how much you should be defending. There's essentially a full extra big blind out there for you to win in an MTT versus in a cash game. So that's the first thing. The second thing, there's not going to be rake in each individual hand in a tournament. This means that it's a zero-sum game from hand to hand, meaning defending is more attractive. Whereas in a cash game, when you call, oftentimes rake is going to be taken. So it's another thing to take into consideration when making your decision. Third, the raise size from game to game can be different. In cash games, we normally see opens 3, 4x type size raises, but in tournaments, we almost always see between 2 and 2.5. Now, what's the sum of all of these parts? The answer, you have to play way looser in the big blind tournaments than you do in a cash game. Maybe against some larger size raises in a cash game, you'd even fold a hand like King 6 or King 7 or Ace Deuce. But in a tournament, that's almost never going to happen. You're simply going to get too good of odds. In the tournament setting, facing a min raise, for example, you only need 16 to 18% equity to defend. That can be basically any hand. In fact, I'd recommend against late position opens, defending almost every hand that you can have in a tournament, particularly against those smaller size raises. In a cash game, you're going to have to think a little bit more about all of the situations. What's the size of the open? As it gets bigger, we should play tighter. What's the rake like if I call and we take a flop? As there is more rake, you should play tighter. And this is also another interesting effect that happens in both tournaments and in cash games. When there's an open and you call in the big blind, it's a much better situation than if there's an open and a call. Why, you might ask? Because you're now up against two stronger ranges that are much more likely to have you dominated, and your odds don't increase by that much relative to how much your equity drops. In fact, you should play tighter in the big blind after seeing one call than if it had just been an open. If it's a heads-up pot, even against a tighter range, you just have so much equity, so much opportunity to win that pot that you have to play a bit looser. Now, as you add in more additional callers, it starts to become neutral or even more favorable to call. The second caller, it makes things a bit more even, and as you have a third, fourth, fifth caller, oftentimes you're going to have to get in there for the call in the big blind just because your pot odds are so good. Let's talk about when you're on a short stack in a tournament, because this is something that I see constantly messed up by a lot of players. Now, it's not a great situation to be on a 10 or 50 big blind stack in a tournament. We all know that. But that does not mean it's time to start playing like a nit in the big blind. Your direct odds to win the pot are still exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is when you do hit, you're going to win less often. Now, the good thing about on these shorter stack sizes is when you flop draws or you flop a solid pair, you oftentimes get to just go with it. And yeah, I get it. When they have a good hand, you're going to get stacked. But you're not trying to avoid getting stacked. You're trying to win as many chips as you can. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If you're near the bubble or near the final table bubble, maybe you want to play a little more conservatively. That's totally cool. But in general, you should strive in both formats to try and win chips as much as possible. So my overall advice for you guys when you're trying to play both those things or both those games, on cash games, lean a little bit tight, be a little bit more conservative, and don't be afraid to just get away from a hand or two that you might want to play. But in tournaments, you're going to have to put your foot down and defend that big blind. If you guys want to learn more about big blind defense and other various concepts in poker, I'd have to recommend checking out the Upswing Poker Lab.